Yeah. So now we are live for the Juris Talks, episode 3, season 2. So this is Abhivardan from Internationalism. And today, in this episode of Juris Talks, we are with the winners of the William C. Wiss International Commercial Arbitration Moot competition. We have the winners from the West Bengal NUJS, which is one of the top national universities in India. And this is such a congratulatory moment that this year we have got some great winners from India in various moods from William Seavis to Stetson. We could not have certain other moods like Jessup and all, but still, I think India really did give a good competition. We have had this legacy. And so, after all of this, let's start the discussion. So, we have Anand, Kaira, Ashika, and Sahaj from the team, which actually brought so much laurels to India. So let's just have a small introduction and then we can just go on. So, Ashika, you can start with your team's introduction. Yep, please.
Yeah, sure. So, hello, my name is Ashika Jain. I'm a third year student at NUJS. And this is my entire team. I think, guys, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kyra. I'm also a third year student, and I was co-speaker with Ashika.
I'm Anand. I'm also a third year student and I was the researcher of the team.
Hi, I'm Sahaj and I'm a second year student and I was the researcher along with Anand.
Great. Thank you so much. So, the very basic question which would be about this year's moot in which you went was, what was the moot problem all about? What was the idea behind the contentions and, how did you deal with it? Like in the general sense, like what was the, I should say, subject matter of the moot, according to your understanding? Ashika, what do you think?
I think Kara would like to take this.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I'll begin and I'll discuss the first two issues and then someone else can discuss the other two. So the first two issues were with respect to the procedural issues of the moot. So the first issue was pertaining to the jurisdiction of the tribunal. It's an arbitration moot. So the first question was with regard to the jurisdiction of the tribunal. And the case at hand that we had received for the problem this year contained a unilateral arbitration clause wherein both parties were allowed to approach the courts of Mediterranean in this present case, but only one of the parties was allowed to initiate arbitration. And it was a question as to whether such an unequal clause is valid or not as per all international law, essentially. And so that was the first issue. And the second issue was with regards to a party-appointed expert who was in a position of potential conflict of interest with one of the arbitrators on the tribunal in itself, and whether this particular party-appointed expert could be allowed to submit evidence. And then we had to discuss the admissibility of such evidence and the potential harms that it may cause in the future proceedings if such conflict of interest were to arise. Ashika, if you want to explain what the other issues are.
Yeah, so those were the two procedural issues, and we had two substantive issues also. So it was basically with respect to the issue of conformity in goods, and unlike the traditional law, wherein in order to prove non-conformity, you have to show that there is some tangible defect in the goods, the issue at hand concerned a suspicion of defects and whether a suspicion in itself could tantamount to a non-conformity, considering several other factors such as the gravity of the suspicion and the reasons on which the suspicion were based. And the final issue was regarding the remedy which the parties had sought, which was basically one party was arguing for the replacement of the goods, the other party, which is essentially the seller, was not agreeing with replacement because that would be too costly for him, and therefore he wanted to just repair the goods. So this was the more or less a gist of the substantive issues at hand.
Great. So let's start with academic questions. So we'll go a little deeper on this. So in general, for such international moots, people focus on the subject matter. I think you've already enumerated much about it. So how did you actually prepare for, the subject matter itself and also the collection, the reading materials, all of it? So, anybody would like to take this? Yeah.
I think one of our researchers might want to take that.
Yeah, sure. So, Anand, if possible, if you could just unmute. Yeah.
So we
Sure.
got we got allotted the moat. Then we had a game plan already before the problem got released. So we decided that all of us will read up both on the substantive part as well as on the merits part of the issue. So we all
Okay.
had basic readings on the LCIA rules as well as on the Convention on International Sale of Goods, which was the governing law for the merits part. And when the problem actually did happen, we adapted with the times or something.
Great, great. So I think I can pass this question to Sahaj or rest of the team as they wish to. Have your views
So,
of? Yeah, sure.
no, I'm so sorry. Just go on.
No issues, no issues. So have your views of arbitration changed in any way after your participation to this competition or after the research and and the process that you had to go through? What do you think? Yeah.
Well, in all fairness, when I took up the moot, I was just the first year, so I had very little clue about arbitration. So it was also a lot of learning about what arbitration really was. So I didn't have particular views on arbitration, but I think as I, engaged with it for a long period of time, almost 8 months, I think I really started to like the subject matter, and I found it really interesting.
Yeah, it's great. That's really great to know. Wow. So I throw this question to everybody who so wishes to take it. Did you find the moot problem coherent to the current challenges related to international commercial law and arbitration? If yes, then why? If no, then why? Floor is yours. Would like to. No issues.
Okay, I'll take this.
Sure.
So, I think the moot problem is quite a contemporary one because, like several other problems, it did have two parties, and the CISG is applicable only in case of, say, transnational parties, that is part. So as in, it was a contract of turbines, wherein one party was operating this hydropower plant, and it had purchased these turbines from the seller. And the issue was with respect to some news of defect in similar turbines which were produced by the purchaser in some other hydropower plant. And this purchaser, that is the buyer at hand, was quite suspicious as to whether the products that this guy had purchased could also be defective. So I think it was quite a contemporary problem in the sense that it involves several complications, not only with respect to, say, the substantive issues, but also with respect to the procedural ones. Being a merit speaker, I think from whatever I could understand about the procedural issues, they were good in the sense that unilateral arbitration clauses, I believe they're really coming up, and they are quite contested because there are still jurisdictions which hold opposing views with respect to this, and the challenge of experts and all of these issues are very, very contemporary. And we even attended a few webinars of scholars who were discussing these problems. So even they consider this problem to be just like a client entering their office, and they would be ready to take it, that sort of thing. So
Wow, that's really great to hear. Wonderful. So, Kyra, this question is for you, if you wish to take it. Would you like to give some piece of advice for all the students who are interested in arbitration? And if yes, then what should they do in order to succeed in this area of law? After your experience with this moot. Yeah.
I mean, discovering your interest in arbitration in itself, I guess, can be done in various ways. It's not restricted to solely this moot in itself. There are various arbitration moots that exist apart from Viz in itself, even on a national scale, that is the NLS arbitration moot. In fact, Ashika had been speaker at the NLS arbitration moot the year before this one. So she was already familiar with arbitration prior to that as well. So there are various ways in which you can, of course, be interested in the subject in itself, and it shouldn't be restricted solely to a moot. Although I think we would all agree when we say that a moot pushes the usual boundaries to the amount of research that you would do into a particular subject as compared to a simple project on the matter. So it's not as, because I think projects, especially in law school, tend to be on a more shallow level with respect to you do a minimum amount of research. But when you do 8 months of research on a big topic, you are forced to like explore aspects that you would never have considered, or potential arguments that you might never have come across if you were doing it for a less amount of time. So I think a moot definitely really helps build that interest in arbitration.
It's really great to know. So Anand, this question is for you, and this is the last academic question. So why should law students participate in, these kinds of moots like William C. Wiss? And what inspiration and learning does the moot court competition signify according to you? What do you think? Yeah.
So I think I'll speak specifically on the William C. Vienna moot. So like the moot primarily deals with the Convention on International Sale of Goods. So through the problem only, we were able to understand how the parties negotiated with each other and what were their balancing of their rights and obligations towards each other. Like what were they willing to lose for them to gain something else from the other party. I felt like it was a very big learning experience into understanding how international contracts work, like in that level. And I think for our moot in particular, like there are no national rounds. So like we could have like, it's like a direct trip to Europe. So that is also a big learning curve,
Exactly.
which didn't happen, but that is a big thing.
Okay, that's really great to know. So, as you guys said that, it takes 8 months for moots like Wiss, Jessup, Stetson, and so on. Nelson Mandela is there, the ICC moot is there, many of them are there. So, for these kinds of moots, generally 8 months, 6 months, it takes time. But let's get to the backdrop. So, I think I can pass this question to all, so anybody can take it as they wish to. So, it's like, all of you can answer if you wish to. So Ashika, you can start, and if you wish to, all of you wish to. What was in your mind, like what drove you to participate in a moot court competition like Wiss, like this one, the Vienna chapter? So what do you think about it? Yeah, Ashika?
Willem Wiss undoubtedly is one of the largest moots in the world, and from whatever we could gather about it from our seniors, we understood that it is a moot in which the arbitrators are real practitioners. They are either counsels or they are real life arbitrators. So the amount that you gain while interacting with people coming from different backgrounds, different jurisdictions, it's really invaluable, because sitting here in our college, like, all right, fine, we didn't get to go to Vienna, but in spite of that, as in interacting with these many people, gave us certain insights into arbitration, which probably books could not give us. Other than that, I think Willem Wiss is also very different because, as Anand said, it is a moot which really does not have these national rounds. So you see, the OS was really great in the university in front of so many different colleges coming from different parts of the world. So, and also arbitration, I think Anand and Sahaj, I think, didn't have any pre-arbitration experience, but Kara and I did have it, in the sense her first moot was in fact Willem East, as in it was the Wiss East moot. So yeah, she did East in her first year as researcher and one Wiss in her second year. So yeah, as in both of us had figured out some interest in arbitration right in our first years from our experience in the different moots. So these considerations were a few of them at hand, which led us to choose this moot. Yeah.
Great. Really elated to know about it, actually. It's like a coincidence. Like you go for the first one and then you try again and again. Wow, it's really great to know. So, yeah. So, Kyra, now this question is for you. What were the main challenges according to you as a speaker? And then, maybe, either if Anand wishes, or, if Sahaj wishes, they can share your question. So what were the challenges, or the main challenges that the team and you had to face? So what do you think? Yeah.
So to start off with, I think your first challenges are with respect to research in itself and figuring out case law and stuff. And I think both merits as well as procedure teams within our team can agree that you always begin a moot feeling that one side of the moot is skewed in favor of one of the parties as opposed to the other. So a lot of us had a mental block whenever we had to try searching for arguments for either the respondent or the claimant for certain aspects. So the first challenge was with respect to finding authorities that are sufficient or have a good enough standing in law in itself to buttress our arguments. But an interesting thing that we learned at the moot in itself, and that we spoke to a lot of arbitrators and learned from, was that they weren't so interested in the authorities themselves as long as you could logically reason out your arguments and prove the merit of your argument, not by basing it in a barrage of authorities that you have, but more by explaining the value of the logic and why your particular way makes more sense. And so, as in that's something that we learned along the way. But for us at that particular stage of research, we found it very challenging to deal with that. When it came to speaking, it was a completely different set of challenges, of course. Firstly, because all of us had our own like quirks and stuff. So I initially used to speak extremely quickly. And so Ashika would keep having to write notes to me saying, slow down, slow down. And my researchers would also have to tell me that. So small stuff like that. But it's all stuff that we all overcame after a series of practices. And then the biggest hurdle, of course, was handling online speeches, because we had practiced in real life for a month when finally the entire pandemic happened and they canceled the competition, and then they announced that it would be virtual. And so then the added challenge that existed for me and Ashika was the inability to communicate with each other directly while the rounds were going on, because she lives in Kolkata and I live in Bombay. So we were giving our rounds for Viz in two completely different places. So we would no longer be able to say, okay, answer the question with this, or slow down, or look, your time's ending and stuff. So then we kind of had to figure out how to be self-sufficient. Like we did a lot of practices with other teams even prior to the competition in itself. We would just organize practices, and we kind of learned to keep a tab on the time, the arbitrator's questions, our arguments, our speed, everything at the same time. But it did take practice.
Okay, that's really impeccable to know, like, after the COVID-19 crisis, after getting this, and people now are not connecting online on this, I think it's somewhere down the line a new practice of its own, because for mooters who are going for offline moots of that sort, I believe that for them it could be of a different experience. But yes, in this case, maybe, as the crisis persists, or whether it is a crisis or not, it's also a question. I don't know, maybe moots could be online for a long while, and then maybe, we'll start trying to get into the offline version again as we used to do for years. And so it's, let's see. But it's really a very insightful point that you have made. So now this is a question open to all, so you can take it. What are your future plans regarding international commercial law and arbitration? Do you consider a future career in either international law or commercial law? So guys, this is open to all of you. What do you think? Yeah.
I think I speak for most of the team when I say that. So we just finished up our second year. So we haven't even done our arbitration courses in law school in itself. All of the knowledge that we have in arbitration is on the basis of the research that we've done for the moot. And while all of us did discover that we were very interested in arbitration, I don't think we've made any choices yet with regards to our careers, because we still have another 3 or 4 years to our interests and our specific the fields that we want to go in for future careers. I think we can all agree if we did end up getting careers in arbitration, because it is a very interesting subject, but I don't think we're restricting any other possible avenues as of yet.
That's really great to know. Wow. Because, yeah, obviously it's time, but hearing in that experiential aspect is very practical and really inspiring. So now this is something which is an impeccable one to ask. So, although we can't say that, we have taken decision on anything, but how competitions like these can inculcate interest among law students, according to your experiential understanding in the field of international commercial law. So what do you think? guys?
Yeah. So like according to me, so in college, so we had to learn contracts, which is the Indian Contract
Correct.
Act. So I never liked contracts per se because it like I felt it was a very boring
Mhm.
subject. But in the moot, we had to deal with international commercial contracts.
Yeah.
So I felt like that like actually pushed the like my knowledge of contracts, and like now like I like got a totally different perspective as to how contracts actually function, like what are the clauses and how it actually happens. So like I think like it's very important, like it plays a very good role in helping like law students or like anybody like to understand like whether like you can't just take a subject and like just because you think it's boring, like if you actually research in it, like you might actually develop an interest in it. I think it was very like the mode itself was very revolutionary for me per se, like to understand that contracts are much more than like random sections and like a lot of cases.
Great. Really nice to know. I think this would be a very important point for people who are interested in rudimentary subjects of law, which they learn in their initial years and so forth, like contract law, constitutional law. So, Saj, this question is for you. What was your, you can say your means the team. What was your joyful and poignant moment in the moot? The best moment you guys had. Be other than winning, what was the best moment all of you had? So, Saj, here you go.
So I think for me, weirdly, it was breaking into the round of 64 because I think I didn't expect it at all. So I think it was a very pleasant surprise. And I think after that, it was just the same feeling over and over again after every 2 hours. So I think to be really honest,
Hmm.
like the 2 days, I just felt really elated the entire time. So I can't really pinpoint a single moment. But yeah, I think to an extent that feeling just never went away because we just won the moot. So every result was just us qualifying further. So I think the round of 64 thing, it was something very novel. So I think that was my favorite moment.
That's
If
really
I
nice to know.
if I could just add a moment to that as well.
Sure,
So
sure.
this is, I think, Ashika and my favorite moment over. In the round of 32, before the round began, we were informed that Professor Jeffrey Weinsheimer would be chairing the arbitral tribunal for us. And both of us panicked because he's literally is the god of arbitration, and we were not sure whether our arguments would withstand his possible questions and everything else. And I especially was afraid because I was the procedural speaker. So I was really worried about what he would think. And we had the side of respondent, which in my head is considerably weaker to start off with, which is why we were really apprehensive about how we would do. And all throughout the round, we could not tell which way it was going to go and whether it was going to work at all. And it was a very tight round, meaning that we couldn't really tell which team was going to qualify at all. And given that these were bubble rounds, it wasn't just the speaking scores that mattered, but it was the overall team effort on both Ashika and my part that would make it. And then I think the best moment for us was discovering that we did in fact qualify from the round of 32 to the round of 16, even with Professor Jeffrey Weinsheimer asking us questions. And it was a great round because he grilled us, but we both actually really enjoyed the process because he made us think about the problem from entirely new perspectives, even though we had been researching on the same problem for 8 months. So it was incredible for us to be discovering these questions right at the very end of these 8 months as well.
Okay, great. It's interesting to know. So this is the last professional question which we would ask. Uh, what was the most significant personal challenge or sacrifice that you had to make in order to maintain your good grades as well as high academic performance? So what do you think, guys? Yeah.
I think moods essentially require moods like this, especially which span over a very long period of time, require a consistent approach towards it. So we didn't keep a
Mhm.
major chunk of our research, say for the last 1 month or the 2 months before the moot. The good thing about this entire team was that we were at the moot from day one. I think the problem released in October, and we
Hmm.
had a good amount of 7 to 8 months for like researching and prepping our speeches, having practices, and all of those things. So I think we just spanned our entire effort over this period of 6 to 7 months, which ensured that we had like a good balance of like our work and also a bit of enjoyment. So like we all live on campus, so we all have a fair share of outings and recreation, and there's always some shows to binge watch and things like that. So I think sacrifices, I wouldn't really say that we did any major sacrifices, so to say, but yeah, we did have to maintain a balance between work and enjoyment at certain times. Like, say, right before the memo submissions, we all ensured that nobody used to go out too much, and like people used to come and work. Like, we have our own moot rooms in the college. So we all used to meet at a certain time, work together, and then get back and chill and do whatever. So I think that amount of discipline was required, but not really sacrificed, so to say.
Not really sacrifice. Great. That I think that's the best way to do. I mean, balance of your own life and balance of your own considerations is something, which is good. So it's really hopeful to know. So this question is for Sahaj. Uh, it is said that the success is something which is not by chance, and it takes a lot of perseverance, and all of that. So, if you wish to summarize yourself, how did you prepare for this in a more logistical understanding? Because this is completely understandable. Yet it takes 7 to 8 months and so on. But logistically, how did you prepare for this from the start until the very last round? And how do you feel and now realize the whole process? So, Sahaj, here you go.
So I think how we managed it was, as Ashika pointed out, we were very consistent throughout, but more than anything, I think we planned really well. So I think the moment we got allotted the moot, we had a meeting and we decided that we have to start with the basic readings. Then we started to understand international commercial arbitration, after which the problem came out. And then we started, dividing specific readings. And then we started working on issues within the problem. And I think it's just a very structured process that we planned out well in advance, which is also why we were consistent throughout the process. And I think towards the end, we started doing minor things like taking note of every question that we were asked and trying to make a compendium out of it, which really helped in the end. And apart from that, I think more than anything, the speakers especially, they tried to learn after every speaking practice and tried to improve. And I think it's basically like aiming for perfection in the entire process and just being consistent throughout.
It's great. It's really great. So it's the last question for all of you. If Anand wishes to take, or Ashika wishes to take, or anybody wishes to take. So for future mooters who are especially in first and second years, or maybe in fourth or fifth years or so forth, what inspiration should they get from this laurel in general, not as a glory and all of that, but in the sense like, it's an effort and it's a laudable effort. So in the sense of your participation and everything, what should inspire future mooters who are even in first, second year, or which year they are, to, go for these kinds of moots and, try their best. Yeah. So, this is the last question. Anybody could try.
Yeah. So I think I'll answer, and like if Ashika wants to add to it, she can.
Yeah, please.
So I think for any year, like who's studying in college, like if they have an opportunity like to work in an international moot, like I would say they should just go for it. Because like in my first year, I did a very like random moot like on constitutional law. And like in my second year, like I got allotted with. So I think like if you work hard and like if you persevere, like you can like get good things. And like if you obviously working hard is a big part of it. Like, you might have to cut back on a lot of parties and all that. But like I think at the end, in the end, like there's like some substance. Like I mean, like we had a great experience as a team throughout the whole process. Like I felt like none of us were like that close before the moot, and all of us bonded. So I think like the team experience as well as like winning the moot is there, obviously, but like I think like the whole experience in like researching as well as finding out new issues and everything, that was like what actually meant the moot for me. Now I know what commercial arbitration is, while like a year back it would have just been another word like that, like high level people would use in their daily conversation or something.
Okay.
I think like if Ashika wants to add, she can.
Yeah, please.
I think all I'd like to say is that irrespective of which year you're in, every moot requires its own kind of work, its own kind of research, and its own kind of practice. So I think one thing which Kara and I never stopped doing was never stopped giving practices. So I remember that we had like a good 2 months time between our final memo submission and our speaking rounds. But throughout these 2 months, we kept practicing. Like even if we didn't have other teams to practice with, or other seniors or the practitioners to give practices to, we would give practices to our researchers only. We had like a big team, and like there were others who were aware of our problem equally as us. So we used to give practices to them. So with each practice, different questions come out, different types of answers come out, and then you can probably just pick and choose as to which answer satisfies the judges the most. How can you shorten your answers, how can you better them in order to, how can you improve on your authorities, things like that. So I think practice is something which really helps, especially given the fact that moots like the WIS, which are extremely, like, they span over a long period of time, they give you the opportunity to practice. So I think at the end of the day, when all the teams come together, the only thing which, say, differentiates team A from team B is, I think, the amount of practices that they put in. Also, since WIS actually releases all the memos and it makes them public, I don't think there's much of a difference between the authorities or the law that people are using. So it's essentially your delivery and how persuasive you sound, which matters at the end of the day, which comes from practice. So yeah, that really matters a lot.
Great. I think it has been an insightful talk, and some good moments were also shared. So it's really great. I again congratulate you on behalf of internationalism for this great win, and it's something not only laudable for India and the institution itself, but it's something which is inspiring for the younger generation who wishes to do something in international law. So this is something which is beyond words. And congrats again. So here we end with this episode of the Juris and Talks, episode 3 itself, season 2. So thank you so much. And that's what we say, never be the same, know the world beyond. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.